There is a cruel truth you keep walking past because it would ruin your favorite fantasy. Working harder and saving more does not automatically make you safer. It can make you more predictable, more controllable, more useful to the people who designed the game. You heard the promise your whole life. Be diligent, be responsible, don't waste money, don't take risks. Then one day your retirement will be waiting like a reward. But watch what happened to the teacher in New York who worked for 40 years, then watched half her retirement vanish after a sudden market shock. Watch what happened to the young family in Shanghai who saved across 3 generations, only to discover the apartment they were counting on was never coming, because the project collapsed. They weren't lazy. They weren't stupid. They were casualties of a mechanism, and the part nobody wants to say out loud is this: their loss wasn't random. It was engineered, not necessarily by one villain in a cape, but by systems that route your money the way a river routes water. If you don't know the river, you drown quietly. So today we are going to talk about the hidden structure behind wealth transfer, the asset reservoirs that hold your savings hostage, and the uncomfortable difference between choice and selection. You can be a good person and still get crushed. You can do everything right and still lose. And once you understand why, you can finally stop blaming yourself for something that wasn't your fault. I want you to feel the tension as you listen, not because I'm trying to scare you, because your nervous system already suspects something is off. You've felt it for years. The feeling that your effort and your income don't move in the same direction as the things you need. The feeling that even when you behave, the world behaves worse. This video is for the people who are tired of motivational slogans and tired of being told to invest better, as if the only problem is your skills. That advice is not wrong because it's stupid. It's wrong because it serves the system. It keeps you focused on personal tweaks while ignoring the machinery that decides outcomes. Let's begin with the simplest lie you were taught. You were told that your money choices create freedom, that you can pick where your savings goes, savings accounts, gold, stocks, real estate. You imagine yourself standing at a dashboard, flipping switches, this way, that way, safe route, profitable route. But freedom is a feeling. Selection is a design. The financial architects didn't build equal doors. They built huge reservoirs and asked you to swim through them. You are allowed to choose which pool you enter, but you are not allowed to opt out of the water pressure. Your money is guided into channels that are already mapped to benefit whoever holds leverage, whoever holds time, whoever holds policy. Think about it like this. There are dams. There are gates. There are people watching gauges in rooms you will never enter. When they decide to open the valve, prices inflate and assets surge. When they decide to tighten, liquidity dries up and your confidence collapses. The price movements don't happen to everyone equally. They happen first to the owners, then to the system, then to you as collateral damage. And this is where the West and the East split into two different survival stories. In the Western model, the heart of the machine is stock markets and credit. In the Eastern model, especially in the property-heavy economies, the foundation is concrete and land. People argue culture. They argue values. They argue Asians just believe in tangible assets. That's the surface story. The deeper truth is more unsettling. The deeper truth is that capital markets are young, opaque, and politically managed in many places, so the public doesn't trust paper. They trust buildings because at least buildings feel real. But whether it's paper or concrete, the reservoir logic is the same. Your savings is not treated as sacred. It is treated as fuel. And fuel is always extracted from somewhere. Now let's look at the first hidden mechanism. In the West, your retirement is not just money. It is a leash. The stock market is sold to you as a place where ordinary people can become rich. You are told that it's democratic, that if you buy and hold, you can grow wealth alongside the economy. But that's not what the stock market was created to do. It was created for corporations to raise capital at scale, and for institutions to manage the savings of millions of citizens through structures designed to keep money flowing. There is a reason you've heard of regulators like the SEC. There is a reason accounting standards and legal systems exist. Those systems don't primarily exist to protect you from losing money. They exist to protect the market's ability to function and to protect the system's participants from chaos that would threaten liquidity. In other words, they protect the machine. Here's what that means in human terms. There is a trust framework so the public will believe the process is legitimate. Not the moral process, the mechanical process. Investors believe it can rise without becoming a total scam, so they keep putting in funds. That belief is institutionalized over decades. You don't see the scaffolding, but it's there holding the facade. And then comes the biggest reservoir: pension funds and mutual funds. In the West, there are enormous pools of money parked in pension schemes and mutual funds. These pools represent real working class effort: teachers, firefighters, doctors, engineers, people who didn't inherit wealth, who traded time and energy for hope. But these pools are required, by design and by regulation, to be invested and generate returns. That requirement creates a massive buyer, a whale, a buyer that doesn't stop just because the market is down, a buyer that has to keep consuming. When you understand that, the stock market stops looking like a fair competition. It looks like an assembly line. Investment banks and financial institutions know that these funds must allocate money into complex products. They create sophisticated financial instruments. They distribute risk in ways that look manageable on paper. And then they know that the pension reservoir will eventually purchase the output. So in this model, the stock market is an engine, and credit is the fuel. Credit isn't just money you borrow to buy a phone or a holiday. Credit is used as an instrument to accelerate asset inflation. Interest rates become the remote control. When central banks want the economy to expand, they push rates down. Cheaper credit triggers borrowing, and borrowing triggers demand: houses, cars, corporate debt refinancing, and share buybacks. Share buybacks then push prices higher, which makes pension balances look healthier. People feel wealthier. That psychological feedback loop is called the wealth effect. It's an illusion with consequences. It trains you to believe that asset price increases reflect real prosperity. It trains you to confuse market performance with life stability. And when the system wants to slow down, it raises rates. Credit becomes expensive again. Liquidity drains. People who are leveraged get punished first. You think you're watching finance news, but what you're actually watching is the machine adjusting speed while your body pays the cost. Then comes the dark masterpiece, the credit score. In the Western model, you are treated like a number before you are treated like a person. Your credit score is not your character, it's an estimate of risk. It determines where you can rent, what car you can buy, whether you can get a job. Soft control. No guns needed, just financial eligibility. If your score is low, doors close invisibly. This is why the Western system can feel so polite. It doesn't need to threaten you, it just needs to make you dependent. It just needs to price your access. And now we remember the perfect storm, the financial crisis of 2008. That event wasn't just bad luck, it was a mechanism learning to eat itself. Banks created toxic loans for people who couldn't actually repay. Then they packaged those loans into securities. They labeled the worst as high grade, turning junk into investment grade, through complex rating systems. Then they sold it into the world through institutional pipelines. Pension funds and investors bought it because they were designed to allocate capital, and because on paper the instruments looked safe. They sold rot and called it gold. When the bubble burst, people lost homes because their credit became a trap. And at the same time, pensions lost value because stock markets collapsed. Two blows at once: immediate destruction of stability and long-term destruction of retirement hope. Who was rescued? Not the people who took the risk. Not the families who got sold the illusion. Governments used taxpayer money to stabilize banks, meaning your money paid to prevent the institution from collapsing. The winners were the ones who had created the conditions for the disaster. This is the core principle of the Western reservoir system. Risk belongs to you. Profit belongs to them. Interest rates are the tool they use to adjust the machine's extraction. When interest is low, they extract through asset inflation. When interest is high, they extract through forced tightening, defaults, and consolidation. You are not a player to them. You are a variable. Now let's move east, because the mechanism changes costume, not essence. In many Eastern models, especially in property-driven economies like China, real estate isn't just an investment. It's a structural pillar of the financial system. It's not a side dish, it's the main course. So people say it's cultural. People say tangible assets matter. Asians love land. They trust buildings. True, but shallow. The real reason is that capital markets there have historically been less trusted because they have felt like a casino. When stock markets are perceived as manipulated, opaque, and vulnerable to insider influence, you don't trust the numbers, you trust brick and mortar. You trust what you can point to. but the reservoir is still there. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Real estate becomes the key collateral that powers the lending cycle. A company that needs a big loan asks, what do you have to secure it? What asset can you pledge? The highest priority answer is land and real estate usage rights. So the loop forms. A company uses land as collateral to borrow money from banks. Then it uses that borrowed money to build or buy more land and real estate projects. Demand rises, asset prices rise. When prices rise, the collateral becomes more valuable. Banks feel safer. When banks feel safer, they lend more. The machine accelerates. This is a self-feeding serpent. It grows by inflating the very thing that backs it. And when policymakers want to stimulate the economy, they don't just adjust interest rates. In many property-based systems, they adjust administrative controls. The property market becomes a giant gate. When they open it, banks release funds into construction projects. Money flows into concrete. Concrete then pulls along other industries: steel, cement, interior design, marketing, brokerage services, employment. It heats the economy quickly. When the economy gets too hot and inflation becomes a threat, they close the gate. They impose limits, restrict risky lending, control credit flows. Suddenly money stops moving. Projects freeze. The market thaws with difficulty. The difference sounds simple. West uses the interest rate as the valve. East uses administrative policy as the valve. But here is the trap that matters most. In this model, the entire stability of the banking system is hostage to the value of property. Now look at what happened in cases like Evergrande. The corporate strategy was built on the loop: borrow to buy land to build to raise prices, use higher prices to borrow more, create cities and skyscrapers that function as financial reservoirs rather than homes. Then when credit conditions tighten, the loop breaks, and the people who pay are not the banks. Banks often get rescued, not necessarily the executives, because they can sell positions or exit before collapse fully hits. The price is paid by ordinary citizens, the families who poured lifetime savings into advance payments for apartments that never completed, the families who borrowed to secure the future home and discovered that future never arrives. Their money doesn't just disappear into an investment loss, it disappears into a broken promise enforced by the system's priorities. So in the Western system, you are a credit point. In the property reservoir system, your savings becomes a brick in a tower that may fall. And regardless of model, you are the piece that gets moved when the gate opens and closes. Now let's talk about the so-called escape asset, gold. Gold is treated as rebellious by the system, not because gold produces magic, because gold interrupts the reservoir flow. Gold is a kind of anti-reservoir because it sits outside most institutional credit and debt machinery. You buy a stock, you are trusting an organization, a corporate narrative, and a market ecosystem. You deposit money in a bank, you are trusting the bank's leverage and liquidity management. You buy an apartment on paper, you are trusting the developer's solvency and the policy environment. But gold is different in a psychologically brutal way. Gold is what people buy when they distrust everyone. Gold is money that cannot be printed by a central bank in the same way paper can. It is not someone else's debt. It cannot be controlled through simple policy rate adjustments. In a crisis, when confidence collapses, gold becomes the last insurance mechanism. That's why governments and central banks often hate gold in practice. They call it idle, dead capital. They prefer your wealth to be inside their systems, where it can be taxed, lent out, recycled into asset inflation, and moved through channels that create liquidity for institutions. They don't want you to say, "I refuse to play." They want you to play. Gold is your refusal. But the system doesn't attack gold with weapons. It attacks your understanding. It labels gold as inefficient. It frames your concern as ignorance. It teaches you to fear safety measures, because safety might reduce the inflow to their reservoirs. Now we connect the final hidden truth, the common function of all these reservoirs: inflation, not only consumer inflation, asset inflation. Central banks can create money through quantitative easing and other liquidity mechanisms. That money has to go somewhere, or it becomes an idle bruise in the system. So they decide whether it will hit ordinary consumption or institutional asset markets. One option is to push money into people's hands directly through stimulus, tax relief, or targeted spending. That tends to increase consumption and raise consumer price indexes. Food, Energy, daily goods get more expensive. People get angry faster. Social stability becomes fragile sooner. The second option is to pump money into the financial system. If it flows first to big banks, those banks then lend to corporations and ultra-wealthy groups at cheap rates. That money then goes into asset reservoirs, stocks and property. So you get inflation of asset prices, not necessarily inflation of your daily bread to the same dramatic extent at first. Stocks go up, real estate skyrockets. Your life improves only on paper if you own those assets. And if you don't own them, your life gets squeezed quietly. You see the rent rise, you see the down payment requirement grow. You watch the average become unattainable. This is the design preference. They would rather create asset bubbles than ignite a consumer price explosion that sparks faster social unrest. So when you're told, don't worry, inflation is under control, what they might mean is consumer prices are managed. Meanwhile, asset prices are becoming a ladder only the wealthy can climb. And here is the final psychological trap, the one that ruins regular people quietly. You are a wage worker, you save money, you think saving is safety, but your wage growth is slow. Your income rises at a pace like 5% a year, maybe less. Meanwhile, the asset prices you need rise much faster, like 30% a year. So you are running the race with a moving finish line. If your salary rises, but the house price rises faster, your progress toward ownership becomes zero or negative. It is not that you are making mistakes. It is that the game is rigged toward transferring purchasing power away from your labor to asset holders. You don't become poor in absolute terms. You become left behind in relative terms. The system changes the definition of success while you're still working for the old one. It drains your future purchasing power and converts your labor into wealth for people who already hold assets or access cheap credit. You keep thinking it's you versus the market, but it's you versus a machine with a built-in winner. So what do you do with this knowledge? First, don't pretend you can destroy the whole system by rage alone. Rage feels cleansing, but it doesn't pay bills, it doesn't fix your rent, it doesn't rebuild your savings, it doesn't reverse price cycles. And if you try to fight it through anger, you will still be trapped, because anger drains your energy and keeps your attention inside the system's drama. The system doesn't mind your anger, it minds your learning. Second, don't accept the guilt script that says, if you failed, you must be irresponsible. That script is comforting for the system because it prevents collective clarity. It turns structural theft into personal incompetence. So the exit is not self-blame. The exit is strategic clarity. Rule 1 is to wake up and stop trusting surface advice. Surface advice sounds like this: just diversify, just invest long-term, just pick better assets, just cut spending. All of that can be partially useful, but it can also be a distraction designed to keep you from asking the question that really matters. What reservoir am I being pushed into? You need to ask yourself a brutal question. Where is my money going when I save it? Which gate am I swimming toward? Does my life depend on interest rate logic, or does it depend on administrative policy? Am I being used as collateral in the background? Look at your own situation without romantic thinking. If you only save in low-yield accounts, you might think you are safe, but safety is not the same as preservation of purchasing power. Your savings is still subject to inflation, still